Hi everyone, this is Julie Bruns. Welcome to the Peace and Possibilities podcast. I want you to thrive and be happy, peaceful, and content, no matter where you are on your journey. This podcast shares stories that will show you how it can be done, no matter what your circumstances. You'll be inspired and come away with a new spark of an idea. Never forget, anything is possible. New episodes are released every Wednesday. Subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review. This helps others find our content and get happier sooner. To possibility and beyond. Welcome everyone to this episode. My guest this week is Shannon Carroll. Hi Shannon, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. Thank you, Julie.
So I only know a little bit about you. I like to tell my audience where we met. We met on an author summit that I had attended. I think it was back in January or February. It was before my book was published. So it must have been January, early February. And I just remember hearing a little bit about your story, Shannon, and being very intrigued and excited to talk to you. And I reached out and I'm like, come on my podcast. So here we are talking about you and your life, and you have a really cool story. I don't know a ton about it. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with everyone, number one, I know you're an author, but it goes way deeper than that. So now that you're an author, what led you to what you're doing now, and how did you start out your career? And tell us a little bit about your story.
Very cool. Well, thank you, Julie, for inviting me on. And I just love we call them divine appointments, the little connections that we have that are unexpected when you run into someone and you're like, I connect with them and I want it to go to the next level, whatever that is. And so thank you for inviting me on today. And I look forward to sharing our story. So a little bit of our history, career path-wise and author-wise. I started out as a registered nurse. I grew up in a medical family. My dad was a doctor. My mom was a nurse. Actually decided to go into medicine when we went on a 6-week mission trip to Africa when I was 12. And we were at a mission hospital, and I was mesmerized by it all. And my ultimate goal was to be able to go back to Africa and be an obstetrician. That hasn't happened. Here I am, a mom and a pastor's wife and a nurse in Southern Indiana. But that was the start of the spark of this interest in helping others and really serving in the medical field. So I got my nursing degree, worked in an ER for several years, did community health for several years, loved my job. The understanding how the body works and the science and getting to see people become more well was just so fulfilling. I thought that I'd be doing that the rest of my life. And I ended up being able to start my own business really by accident. I got involved with some essential oils, and they worked for my family. And I started telling people, hey, guess what? These bottles of oils really do work. I was pretty skeptical about them, and they shared with their family and friends. And before you know it, I had this side hustle that was replacing my income as a registered nurse. So it'll be 5 years in June that I came home from the hospital to run my own business out of my home. And the cool thing is you get to see how this plan and this path weaves its way through all of your life. You know, in the moment, we don't often understand the why about what's happening, but when we have some hindsight, we can look in the rearview mirror like, that's why I had to go this direction and then that direction. It makes sense. So now I am able to help people be more well than I ever was in a hospital type setting with what I get to do and interact with people. So I homeschool 2 of our boys. My husband is a pastor, and we just have a busy, full life. The author thing was another unexpected journey that happened. Maybe we'll get into that in just a minute, but that's the story of my career.
I love that I didn't know that you were into essential oils. I love them too. My sister, I got introduced to them through some moms at my son's school several years ago. And then my sister started using them. And then I started same as you, introducing them to, well, not really my friends, because same as you, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do this, but enough people knew about them. And I started using them at home, and now I'm using all these products that aren't that are way better for your body and mind and health and all of that. And then my husband's been using some of the stuff. So it's so cool. All of the information behind it. And I'm glad it's becoming more mainstream than, 5 years ago, it was like, what are these oils? What do you mean they can affect your body in a good way without medicine? It's like, I love it. So that's cool. I'm glad. I didn't know that was part of your story. So let's talk about I didn't know all of that about your background, and that's really cool. And I loved what you said about how much you loved being a nurse, but now you can take what you do and helping people with their health and now incorporate it into this new business, but in a well care, like healthcare kind of thing, so that's very admirable. And I'm happy that you're making a living doing it, because I think it's so important. I think more people need to know about it. Okay, so the book. So now you're an author, but the author is or isn't related to you being a healthcare practitioner or person, or what?
No, totally unexpected journey. I had always had this dream, like a bucket list of being an author. I had no idea what my book would be about. And I thought maybe it'll happen way down the road when I actually get clarity about that. But we were just living our life, and we went through a really traumatic experience, and the book was birthed out of that traumatic experience. So 2 years ago, actually in April, again, living normal life, working. My husband was working. Church life is pretty busy and stressful. It's a very unique career path. You can't ever really turn it off. And the family is very much affected by what's happening in church. And we've got that, and we have the home-based business and the homeschooling. At the time, we lived on this homestead with over 5 acres, and we had chickens, and we had this huge organic garden and an orchard and a pond, and all these dreams of being self-sufficient, little boys growing up, and they were all really good things, but we were stressed out. And we often talked about, okay, what can we take off of our plate? And we would map it out and look at it, and nothing significant ever came off the table. So we just kept doing the same thing, and we'd have a little vacation here or a weekend off, but life was pretty stressful. So on a Sunday in April 2019, my husband was not feeling well. He was having chest pain. He was anxious. His color wasn't great. And with my background in nursing, I thought he was having a heart attack. And it had kind of been building for the past few days. It had been a fairly stressful week. And he insisted he was fine. He wanted to continue on with preaching that morning. I knew it was so bad that I had enlisted the help of an EMT and a couple of nurses in case he collapsed during the service. And I think back, I'm like, what in the world?
Instead of just making him stay home, because men are just like, I'm fine, go.
Hindsight, yes. So we had this plan in case he collapses. He made it through the service miraculously, but then afterwards he was like, I need to go to the ER. I'm not feeling good. So that was a sign that it really was bad. And then he let me drive him to the emergency room, which was another sign, because he doesn't like my driving. Yeah. But anyway, we were about 30 minutes from the nearest emergency room. I thought we had time to make it, but on the way down, he kept saying, I'm not feeling good. And then he said, my vision is starting to get blurry. And anyway, he ended up becoming unresponsive about 20 minutes into the trip. And I noticed he wasn't responding to me, wasn't talking. And I'm, David, are you there? And I'm shaking him. And this is how he looked.
Oh my gosh.
So I pulled over to the side of the road, called 911, ran around to start CPR. Again, grateful for my career and my medical training. He did have a pulse. He was breathing, but it was very irregular. But he was out, totally out. Eyes were open, staring off to space, really erratic vital signs. It was the scariest 10 minutes of my life. And I, at one point, in the screaming and the crying and the praying and the trying to rouse him, I had this thought, like, is this how it all ends? On the side of the road? Is this, it all comes to this? Is this it? And it was a really traumatic experience. Well, a few minutes before the ambulance got there, he kind of came to, but he was very anxious, said his chest was really hurting. He was having trouble breathing. The ambulance got there. We got him to the hospital. I wasn't sure if he was going to be alive when we got there. I had no idea what was going on, but thought it was, again, a massive heart attack. They hook him up to the monitors and everything looks perfect. for the heart. And they start doing blood work and it's all perfect. And then he starts getting really paranoid and really confused and saying things like, they're out to get us. We've got to get out of here. And he said he needed a drink. So I got him a drink of water and goes, no, you can't have that. There's poison in it. And he thought he still worked at that hospital where he had been in IT at that hospital before. He thought he needed to get back to that job. And he wouldn't listen to me when I said, you don't work there anymore. So then they started checking out his brain and thinking, has he had a stroke? Is there some type of brain tumor that's making all of this happen? And his brain started checking out fine. The paranoia and the confusion subsided. And at that moment, we realized he had amnesia and he could not remember the last 8 to 13 years of our life. We come up with the timeline because he had been at the church where we were for 13 years and he had zero recollection of the church. So here he was, a pastor. That was his career, full-time pastor. Thought that was the craziest thing in the world. How could that be me? How could I be a pastor? No, I work in IT.
He was in IT before that?
Mm-hmm. He was. And it was totally foreign to him. What's the name of our church? What? It's in this town? Huh? What do you mean? So we had been at the church for 13 years and he didn't remember any of that. However, our youngest son was 9 at the time and he remembered him, but he thought he was still in a car seat. So that's where we get the 8 to 13 years. So in between those 8 to 13 years, we're really fuzzy. And like prior to the 13 years, he remembered our life. He remembered me, but he thought we were newly married. He thought we were in a home that we had moved out of several years prior. He didn't know new people that had joined our extended family. I remember sitting in the emergency room and I said to him, hey, do you know Donald Trump and the businessman? He said, yeah, I know him. And I said, well, he's the president of the United States. He goes, no way, get out of town.
Oh my gosh.
And then I was sitting there holding my phone, texting people because we had just been through a lot that day. And he said, what's that? And I said, well, it's an iPhone. And he said, what is that? That looks a lot different than a BlackBerry.
Oh my gosh.
It was a multifunctioning device from around 2010 to 2012. So they kept him in the hospital for 2 or 3 days, ran every test under the sun. He saw psychiatrists and neurologists and cardiologists, and they did stuff for his brain and his heart. Everything checked out completely normal. They said, you're a healthy man. All that we can figure, they said, is that years of cumulative unaddressed stress caused your brain to shut down. Wow. They said, we don't know if your memories are going to come back in a day, a week, a month, a year, or never. Just go live your life.
I'm just getting full body chills as you're describing this. It's crazy. I can't even imagine what you were going through, but it's also like people that say like stress doesn't, I mean, that's insane that it could do that to his brain, to his body. It's crazy.
It is. And that was one of the biggest wake-up calls we had, that we can't live this stressed out life anymore. It's not normal. Our body is not meant to take that much stress, and we've got to figure something out. You know, we always say, well, if God would just give me a sign in the sky. Okay, we got our sign. Here it is. Hello, life can't look anything like it did before. Mm-hmm. So we went home, again, not knowing if his memories are ever going to come back. And he didn't recognize our house, didn't know what side of the bed he slept on, didn't recognize the dog, didn't know his passwords, didn't know anything. Wow. What was really interesting is that the things that he could not remember, he had no emotional attachment to. For example, the house and the homestead, it was huge and it was a ton of work. And he said, why in the world do we have chickens? I was like, well, that was your idea. Yeah. Why do we have this massive garden? I said, well, that was your idea too. Yeah. And why do we have all these fields? Well, you were going to do this and this and this. He goes, that was crazy. What was I thinking? He said, why was I the pastor and the worship pastor at our church? That's too much. Why did I ever take that on? Oh. He said to me, why are you on your phone all the time? Why? He was just so emotionally detached from everything, which was a great opportunity, but also very difficult for me because I was emotionally attached to all those things. The chickens have names. Our church is our best friend. They're carrying us through during this time, yet he didn't know anyone from church. And we had a couple opportunities where he got to meet people like our associate pastor or best friends, and they would just have to come in the room. People we'd been on trips with and done life with, come in the room and just shake his hand and be like, "Hi, I'm so-and-so." And he would say, "Hi, nice to meet you." And so bizarre. Wow. So anyway, the miracle of the story is 26 days later, we were on vacation in Florida because he said from day one, we've got to get away. He asked me, do we ever take vacations? And I said, this was day one in the emergency room. Do we ever get away? And I said, you get about 4 weeks off a year from the church. And last year we took advantage of 2 of those weeks, and they were both for business trips for my business.
Oh my gosh.
So life lesson, hello, take your vacations, take your holidays. Our culture, our workaholic mentality is killing us. Yes. And so he said, day one, we've got to get away. So some friends provided for us to get away in Florida for a week. I knew the week was going to be healing. We talk about in our book that week because it was a pretty traumatic week. It was a roller coaster week. But the day before we were to leave, he got up in the morning to see the sunrise, and he was sitting on the balcony having his quiet time. He got done and he stood up. And you know, when you stand up too fast, you kind of go black a little bit. It just dims on your vision. That happened to him, but he said it was like total blackness, darkness. And he had to grab the railing and he thought, what's happening to me? Am I going blind now? And he just stood there holding the railing. And he said, this strong, like you hit your funny bone type of a nerve pain started at the top of his head and went straight through his entire body, out his feet. And as soon as it left his feet, he said his eyes, he could see again, and he was thinking about the church. And he realized in that instant, every single memory had come back.
Like a bolt, almost like a bolt of lightning. Like
done.
Oh my gosh.
Done. Open, eyes open.
26 days later in Florida.
Say that again.
26 days later in Florida.
26 days later in Florida. Yep. So he runs into where I am. He goes, Shannon, my memories are back. I think they're back. And I said, are you kidding me? He goes, why would I kid about something like that? He goes, ask me something.
Oh my God.
And I said, I can't think of anything to ask you. And so I figured out one thing I could ask him to test, and he gave the right answer. And we just cried and sobbed. Like, they're back. They actually came back. God provided an absolute miracle in an instant. He said before it was like someone had taken an ice cream scoop to his brain and just scooped out all of the memories, and nothing could make them come back. But in an instant, when God decided it was time, they came back. So our life, we learned about 5 super life-changing lessons through the whole amnesia experience, stress being one of them. And so we just started telling people, these are the lessons we've learned. We started speaking. People said, you've got to write a book. I mean, who has amnesia these days? That's such a bizarre story. But what was such a nightmare turned into the best gift ever. And God gave us a bizarre story, I believe, so that we could have a vehicle to share these lessons with other people and help other people learn how to prevent what happened to us without having to lose their own mind in the process. So we wrote a book. We started writing it last year in February 2020, and it launched in October of this past fall, became a best-selling book, and people's lives are being changed because of it. And so in the middle of it all, I remember David saying, I don't understand why this is happening to me. I don't get this. This is weird. It's crazy. It's very unsettling. It was very difficult. Yes. He said, but if it can help one person, so be it. And that was his mentality the whole time. So we're now authors, best-selling authors is that we can add to our career list.
I can't wait to read the book. I did write it down last time we met, but I didn't. I'm going to get it for sure.
Well, I'm going to send you a copy. So you just
thank you. One Thing Remains. That's the name of it. One Thing Remains.
Yep. One thing remains, one couple's traumatic encounter with amnesia and their life-changing journey to restoration.
Oh my gosh, I love the cover. I saw it before, but yeah, I love it even more. But mine's similar where it's got that, it's on a dock and it goes, to the future. Oh my gosh, Shannon. So I have a couple of questions. So I love what you said about, so in the beginning, when you both were agreeing that your life was too much stress, you didn't do anything about it, which is most people. This isn't meant to be a critique. It's just interesting that you knew it, and you talked about it. Some people don't even talk about it. They just say it's stressful. What are we going to do about it? You guys said something needs to change and nothing was changing, or you didn't do anything to change it. And then this thing happened. Mm-hmm. So, but now I love that you're taking that hardship and saying like, yeah, just like anything, don't wait for some lightning bolt or a massive bad thing to happen to you before you change your life. Sometimes that's what people need. They just need to be woken up that way. And other people, just like me, would say, I see it in other people. I don't want that to have to be me. I don't want to have distress to whatever to change my life or illness or whatever it is. I'm going to do it before. I'm going to be proactive. So I love that you're taking that hardship and being proactive about it for other people. Are other people getting it, or are other people saying like, oh, I don't know, like it's just meant to be stressful, or is it getting through to people because it was so dramatic for you guys? Like,
I think it is getting through to some people. They see how we lived out loud. We put our homestead, our gorgeous, lovely homestead, on the market. And we moved a year ago to a neighborhood with 3/10 of an acre and a smaller house that is our place of peace and light. And we're in a season of just peace and rest, because we had to do major surgery. And so it hurts. It's painful because you have to get rid of things that aren't bad. They're good things. But also we found out that our value and our identity was wrapped up into our career and our hobbies. Mm-hmm. At the time, my Instagram handle, which she didn't know what Instagram was, but my Instagram handle was Carroll Homestead. That was we had wrapped our interest into our intrinsic value in our identity, which is why it's so hard to cut it out, because it means something to us. It's valuable. Yeah. But when you have this awakening, you realize what is good is not necessarily what's best. I only have time in my life and space and energy and brain cells for what is best. And it changes from season to season. So even here we are 2 years later, and we're very sensitive to stress. If we start sensing that either one is getting too stressed, like time out, we've gotten too busy, we've added too much to our schedule, do we need to take a nap? Do we need to just turn the to-do list over for a couple of days? Do we need to get away for a long weekend? Do we go for a walk? What do we need to do to reset? Right. Because the stress meter is starting to increase, and we can't let that happen.
I love that. And I know you said you have 2 boys?
Yes, we have 3 boys. The oldest is 18 and the younger 2 are in 5th and 6th grade.
Okay. I love that they also are getting this lesson, because I have 2 boys too. They're older, going to be 19 and 24, but seeing you guys live this way now, instead of just like, wait a minute, time out, like just with them, like you're stressed, you just reacted in a way that isn't necessarily normal for you. What does that mean? And then they see you doing it, so they learn to do it, and they say like, okay, I need a nap. I need to walk outside. I need to get rid of this energy, whatever it is. I don't need to study for 3 hours for that test. 1 hour is plenty, whatever it is. I love that. So then they're going to have these tools growing up, instead of like waiting for something bad to happen to go like, oh, wake up, I have to do something about it now. Like, it's just so important. I'm so glad you're making, just being proactive and taking your lessons and helping other people with them. It's just like the best.
As a self-employed entrepreneur that works from home, it feels like there's always something to do, right? If you have a vision and you've got the work plan and the business plan, and there's always more you can be doing. And if you're working from the 4 walls of your house, like you're in a constant office state of so much to do. So I've had to make significant changes in how I operate my home-based business based on what we went through with amnesia, and having specific office hours, and telling myself, yes, I could probably accomplish this much more and make this much more money. I know I could. But it's not worth what it's going to take to get there.
At what price? At what price? Wow. So how did you stay as that was happening to your husband and you guys kind of had to reevaluate and change things up a lot, obviously, how did you stay while you were building your business? Your essential oil stuff kind of happened accidentally, and then the stuff with your husband, how did you stay peaceful and content along the way and sane? Because I'm sure the last 2 years with going through all that with your husband was like, you had the normal brain while that was happening to him, right? So you had to like think for both of you. And normally you have this partner that says, all right, let's talk about this together. And what are we going to do? You have to rely on your friends and your family and stuff, but how did you stay like grounded and how did you not have a nervous breakdown?
It's a really good question. And I was his Google. I was his 24/7 historian. He could not go anywhere without me. I was his link to the current world. So I had to think like him, but I also had to be fully present for our boys and our current life and like the liaison with our church and our family and all these things that he didn't know. Quick example of that is we walked into the house one day and he said, hey, your water heater is leaking. You need to call your plumber. So he's putting it on me because he has no emotional attachment to the water heater or the house. It's all mine. It wasn't
like a weird thing to say instead of like, oh, our house. It's like weird.
Your house, your water heater, your plumber. And I said, well, our plumber's number is in your phone.
Yeah.
And so I was doing this juggling act. So how did I stay sane? Well, one was he was still the same David. His personality had regressed a little bit, his understanding of life, but I still had my husband. You know, I had that experience on the side of the road where I almost lost him.
Yes.
And so knowing he's here, he's alive, we might have to take a few years to process this or to figure out what life looks like, but he's here.
Yes.
I'm grateful and I have enough. You know, that became enough. All these other things all of a sudden weren't as important. So my gratitude changed. And also I had my family and my church to carry us, even though he didn't know who our church was. What he saw was they are loving people who give of themselves continually to serve our family. Yeah. And they would drop meals off on the front porch. They sent texts and messages. And so they carried us, which was a big tug of war because he wanted to leave the church because he didn't know any of them, didn't know what his career was like, didn't recognize any of that. Now, well, the church is our lifeline right now. And so there was a major tug of war. And then the other thing was just my own faith and knowing for me, I had to have time alone every day where I could journal. And I journaled a lot, which is where a lot of the content of the book comes from, me walking through that and processing it. We honestly, until we wrote the book, we didn't know what each other was thinking or feeling during that time. But he read my parts. He said, I had no idea you were struggling with that. I said, well, how would you have known? Right. You didn't know half of the things we were doing. Right. And so writing the book was a part of the healing process for us to get our thoughts on paper and to read them for each other. But then time in God's word, that's how I filled up music, quiet time, and my faith in the Lord really carried me.
Wow. The same thing happened with me with my book. Like my husband never even read it before it was published. He's editing the audio version, the audiobook I recorded a month ago or whatever. So he's been hearing my stories, listening to them. And he's just like, what, some of the stuff he's known about, or I mean, nothing was really a big surprise, but he just didn't know what the book was going to say, you know, same thing. So he's like, it's just a different, it's fun. And it is healing, and it brings you closer. Even if you just wrote the book and he read it or whatever, it's like, I can definitely see how that would have impacted you. It's so fascinating. Oh, I'm so glad you did that, and you're bringing your message out to the world, and the world needs it. And I think especially now where people have had more time to reflect with everything going on the last year, and more time in general, people are saying like, okay, what do I want my life to look like? I have control over it. I don't have to go back to this is the new normal. I don't have to go back to the old normal. I hope so many people don't. The people that have woken up and can say, I'm going to do things differently. And I don't want to have to wait for a pandemic to change my life, or an illness or a tragedy or whatever it is. So I admire you so much for writing a book and taking something hard and making it just, the phrase keeps escaping me, but just like taking this bad thing and turning it into a good thing for other people. And
It was
now,
a
all these-
transformation, a
yeah,
true transformation. And
yeah.
just to clarify, David and I both wrote the book. So he has just as much in there from his perspective. And we
Oh,
write it just like we talk, with back and forth and some of my thoughts and some of his thoughts. And it's
fun.
a really good round, I don't know, portrayal of what we went through. It's
I
very
think that makes it
vulnerable.
more interesting. I think it would have been interesting either way, but to have yours and then his, I think that's going to be, yeah, just to see it from both sides.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
It's pretty wild.
Okay, so what would you tell people that are looking for meaningful work? So you found this new work that you love, love, love. You loved your old nursing career. What would you tell people that are looking for a meaningful career where they can use their strengths and have a less stress but meaningful life? Like what advice do you give? Or to your sons, what do you tell them? What do you tell people?
I think you have to pursue what you're called to, what you know down deep in your heart that you were made for, and what your purpose is, and evaluate what is this going to cost me? It might feel like it's my dream, but if it costs me too much, it's not worth it. There's a fine balance, and everyone has to figure it out for themselves, what that balance is between being willing to give and sacrifice and work long hours in order to reach your dream. Yes, I'm not saying don't do that,
Right.
but is it going to require too much? Is it going to kill you in the process? Are you going to lose out on those memories and those times of rest and peace in the process? If so, this might not be the season for that particular dream that you have. You really have to take inventory of it all, and also enjoy the process. I never would have imagined I'd be here helping people with natural living and chemical-free living and essential oils, and also talking about our book and being an inspirational speaker. That would have never been on my radar. But you flow with the things that happen in life and trust the process, and someday look back and say, wow, thank you, God. That is awesome.
Yeah, it all happened for a reason. It's all connected. I love that. I love what you said about, is this the season? I'm sure you're teaching your boys this too. It's like, maybe you can have it, just not now, or maybe it's meant for you, but it's meant for you in a year or two, and it's meant for you because there's something else in the middle. I was just talking with a friend the other day about this, like, it's going to happen. It's just not the right timing for whatever reason. And you have to trust that, which is tough because you just want to do, especially if you're a doer and you want to, you're proactive and you want to change things and make things happen. And like myself, and sounds like you are too. It's like, well, how can I expedite that? How can I shift that? How can I, whatever? It's like, no, you just have to keep letting the lessons come and reflect and go with the flow and figure out the next move, and then just wait and trust. And it's tough, but, the sooner you learn that lesson, I think the easier your life is, just because you know that there's something bigger out there, like setting everything in motion. And it just makes it, like you said, with your faith, it makes it easier to just kind of say, okay, this is here to teach me something. But the fact that you guys did that so quickly too, after everything that happened to you, is also a testament to who the two of you are, and the fact that you want to help people with it. Instead, you could have just said, all right, well, we're going to get our life together, and maybe in 5 years we'll write a book. But instead, and I'm guessing it helped you heal faster, you and your husband, with everything that happened. And I'm sure your kids too, they were probably freaked out, but doing all that together, writing the book, has probably expedited that process, I would guess.
It has. Before Amnesia, with my husband being a pastor, you already feel like you're in a little bit of a fishbowl. And he had this idea that we need to be pretty private with our life. Yeah. And there was a lot of pressure to just, obviously you don't want to ever air your dirty laundry, but just to keep things under wraps a little bit. And so during Amnesia, people started asking us, everyone, what's going on? How is he? And I was getting inundated with messages. And I said, can I post on Facebook? Are you fine if I just post what's going on? And he said, sure. Like his personality almost changed a little bit during that time. And he said, I would read the post to him about what we went through that day, maybe the hard things or the funny things with amnesia, life with amnesia. He's like, yeah, post it. If it helps somebody, yep, go ahead and post it. And this following started to happen of hundreds of people looking for our post every day about how are we doing? How are we handling life with amnesia? What's the good? What's the bad? And we were kind of, we allowed ourselves to live out loud and to be vulnerable in the middle of the crisis.
Mhm.
And in doing so, it was such a powerful exercise to see how people responded.
Mm.
And that's been our life since then of, amnesia has a way of really humbling you and breaking you, and realizing that our authentic living is going to impact other people. So
Love that. It's beautiful. What would you say, final question for you, what would you say every day, what would you say your greatest gift is to the world, to who you come in contact with? What do you offer that's like the best thing about you?
the first word that comes to mind is light. I hope that I radiate light, and the light of truth, and that those who come in contact with me can feel enlightened, inspired because of their interaction with me. I hope that I can live in such a transparent way that they feel validated, heard, and seen, and then inspired to move to the next thing. I don't want anyone to ever stay stuck. When we're stuck and we're stagnant, what does stagnant water do? It starts to stink a little bit, right? And so we're constantly evaluating, constantly growing, constantly thinking, how can I grow in this area and be transformed and be open to being transformed? And so I hope that when people are with me, they are inspired by my example of light and transformation.
I think that's exactly what it is. I love that. It's awesome. And when you're being who you are and sharing your gifts with the world and being vulnerable, how could you not be exuding light? So yes, you are. And thank you so much, Shannon. How can people find your work or whatever you want to tell them about, and then your book? Where can they go to get all that?
Well, thank you. That is very kind of you to ask. So we have a website that we are working to develop a little bit more, but it is davidandshannoncarroll.com. You spell it out, David and Shannon Carroll, CARROLL.com. And there's a way to contact us on there and watch a video with both of us. It's like a 3-minute video about our story. And then you can get our book on Amazon right now. We have the hardback, paperback, or Kindle version, hopefully audiobook coming later this year. And we are on social media platforms, but the website's probably the best way to find us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been a very inspiring conversation, and I'm excited to read the book. And I can't wait to see how many people it inspires, because it's just more of what we need. So thank you. Thank you for doing it and taking the time to do it so that others can be inspired and learn from your awesome life lessons.
Thank you, Julie. I am honored with your invitation to share today.
Aw, take care, Shannon. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you love this content, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you found us on. You can get all my social media links in the description below. Help us keep the momentum going so that every person can live their lives happily, doing work they love.